second game of the new speedrun. We are playing classical openings all the way through around 1300. That's going to be the new wrinkle. And by that I mean we're essentially not playing gambits. We are going to play openings that I recommend to beginners. So 1396, wow. We actually get a pretty high-rated opponent. That's fine with me. I mean, I don't really mind that. We don't have to play only beginners all the time. So let's go e4, e5. And, okay, so this is called the bishop's opening. It is intimidating to many people. And obviously it's the opening where white develops the bishop first. Now, the way that black should react to this is no different than how you play against the Vienna, for example. Since white didn't go knight f3, we don't need to start with knight c6. We can start with knight f6 and exploit the fact that white has not gone knight f3, d3. And now again, many possible schemes of development here. But, you know, there's a line with c6, which I'm not going to play. The simplest is just to develop the other knight with knight c6. And after knight f3, we've transposed into an Italian. So with the move bishop c5, we transpose into a full Italian. We can also play the move bishop e7 here, which is a slightly more passive developing move, but also perfectly viable. Since we're trying to play very solid, I'm going to play bishop e7. And, you know, hopefully we're going to get a little practice in, you know, playing out these dry positions. Okay, so we can go d6, we can castle. It really doesn't matter the order in which we do things here. Let's go d6 and then castle. Castles. Yeah, this is the Hungarian variation. It is quite passive, but extremely solid. We have no weaknesses. The position is relatively symmetrical with the exception of, you know, white's bishops being marginally better placed, but we're going to try to neutralize that. I'm assuming that, okay, bishop e3. So how should we play here? We obviously have one undeveloped piece left. Would we be justified in playing bishop e6? Is this trade something to fear for black? If you've listened to the previous speedruns, you know the answer to that question. In Italian positions, the opening of the f-file is generally good for the side that controls it, for whom the f-file opens, even if it means doubling your pawns. So bishop e6 is rarely a move that you should refrain from playing based on bishop takes c6. That's never dangerous. Although we have doubled pawns in the center, that pawn on e6 will control important squares as well as the pawn on e5. And we're going to have free pressure down the f-file. The other advantage of developing the bishop to e6 is that if white doesn't respond, if white continues the standoff, we don't have to take on c4. We can actually break through in the center with the move d5, gaining space for our pieces. So it's kind of a tough situation for white to figure out what to do. And he takes it. Okay, I like it. And we take. And now I already like black's position here. Now, one additional comment I'll make here is that white is not castled yet. We need to be prepared for white castling in either direction. Thank you, Superfralis. We need to be prepared for white castling in either direction. Just putting that out there. How should we proceed here? We've got many good approaches. Many good approaches. One good move is, for example, to play queen e8. Perhaps aiming to bring the queen to g6 in the event that he castles short. We can also play more ambitiously. We can play a move like a6 to prepare a pawn storm if he castles queenside. If he castles kingside, then a6 is still a helpful move. We can also go d5. That, to me, that is probably what I would play over the board. But again, I want to continue playing very solid style for the purposes of the early part of the speedrun. So let's stick with the move, the flexible move a6. Again, why? First of all, this is just a helpful move in general. It's not going to hurt. Not going to hurt to control the b5 square. But if he castles queenside, then we can jumpstart our pawn storm with the move b5. Okay, if white castles short, then we're going to have clear ways of pressuring him down the f-file. Yeah, a5 would weaken the b5 square. So if I will answer this after the game, but a5 is a little too weakening in this position. Okay, g4. That's a blunder. Blunder's a pawn. Who can tell me? Actually, this is quite an instructive moment because we have two ways to win the pawn. Immediately, you should notice I've primed you to look at the f-file. The knight on f3 is left undefended. This screams discovery tactic. There are two of them. Knight takes g4, knight takes c4. Let's use our logic. After knight takes g4, pawn takes g4, we've opened up the h-file for him. Given that white is probably going to castle queenside, doesn't seem very advisable. So much better idea is to take the center pawn because it's the center pawn, but also because we don't open any avenues on the king side for him. This is easy to calculate. He takes it. We take the knight on f3. It would be a good idea to make sure that your rook doesn't get trapped somehow on f3, but since we have the whole f-file, we have nothing to fear. And we're going to be up a pawn here. And after any such pawn trade, quickly we ask ourselves, how has the position changed? What new ideas can we try to apply? One idea that has become quite a bit stronger with the absence of the e-pawn, just thinking logically, is what? What idea seems a lot more attractive now that the e-pawn is gone? Just put the dots together. Well, yeah, the move d5 looks extremely appealing because it sends the knight back. Then perhaps we have d4. That bishop on e3 might get trapped. So our eyes are already on the move d5. That's going to be our default reaction. Bishop g5. Okay, so d5 still looks very good here. What's going to happen is he's going to take the bishop. We're going to take with the queen. We're going to chase the knight out of the center. I see absolutely no reason to refrain from this move. Takes. Then we're going to bring the other rook to f8. It's already very depressing for white. Knight d4 was also great, yeah. Okay, he takes it. We take, obviously, with the queen. My guess is this is going to go knight g5, which is going to further exacerbate the situation. Well, I would love to reroute the knight to f4, but it's very, very hard to do. I just don't see a path because e6 is blocked by a pawn. Otherwise, we could try going like this. Knight g5. So where should we go with the rook? An instructive moment here. A lot of people default to going rook f8, but don't rush to bring the rook back. Don't rush to bring your pieces all the way back. If you notice the fact that the queen defends the knight, our queen pressures the knight. The move rook f4 slices off the connection. That knight is simply trapped. He's got to go h4. That gives up another pawn. And white's position essentially collapses. Now, if he goes h4, we have another interesting moment to talk about. Okay, so Dr. X Max Easy actually makes a very good point. There's a couple of ways we could play this. The obvious move is rook takes g4. Now, some of you are presenting a valid counterpoint, which is that rook takes g4 opens up the g-file. After rook g4, he is likely to castle, and maybe he gets a rook on g1 and gets some sort of counterplay. Unlikely that just the g-file alone is going to give white sufficient counterplay for the two pawns. But an idea would be to play h6 first. Kick the knight away to h3, then take on g4. That seems to dull white's any potential kingside initiative. But we also have a third approach. We don't have to touch any of this at all. We can play a move such as knight d4, or even more incisive is rook a to f8. Knight d4 is not going anywhere. Knight d4 also doesn't threaten anything, which bothers me a little bit, because this square is protected by white's knight. Knight d4, he can play c3. So don't rush to bring our pieces to central squares. This move creates a big threat of rook takes f2. Forces him to commit further, and then we're going to decide. Hopefully the logic makes sense here. Now, all of these moves are good. h6 is good, rook takes g4 is good, knight d4 is good. In many of these positions, as I often say, don't bog yourself down trying to figure out why one particular move is better than the others. Oftentimes, it's going to be two or three valid alternatives, as it is here. So if you guys are asking, why didn't we play X, it might just be more or less random or a matter of taste. So I'll explain why it's a threat. It's not just two rooks for the queen. If you calculate further than that, you'll see that we win a bunch of pawns on top of it. First of all, it's two rooks for a queen and a pawn. And we're already up a pawn, so it's going to be two pawns. But if you think about the position after takes, we have a fork in that position. Who sees it? While he's thinking, I can answer the question. Yeah, queen c5 check. And then we take c2. This is a common thing, a queen fork at the end of a line. There's a very famous game that features a similar type of idea. c4. Okay, so this move does a whole lot of bad. First of all, it permanently weakens the d4 square. And so now I love the idea of just slamming the knight into d4. We can still play rook takes f2. Nothing wrong with that. But now I feel like we can squeeze a lot more out of the position just by bringing our pieces to dominant squares. And of course, pawns don't go backwards, so he can never chase us away from d4. Now we're threatening h6, followed by knight f3 with a fork. No, so queen takes g5 is obviously a decent transition to a winning endgame. But remember what you're playing for. You're playing to win. It's a much more economical way to chase the knight away with the move h6. So don't be fancy just to force liquidation. Try to find the nicest, you know, the most efficient way to win. I mean, this is like a model position. White has no moves. We play to win the game. Right, exactly. If he castles, we take f2 with a devastating second rank attack. Yeah, I like how we have just a pawn on a6 from past life. Okay, rook h3. This doesn't substantively change anything. We can still go h6. In fact, the knight is now simply trapped. Which is kind of funny. Yeah, I think this might be resigns. No, that wasn't Kasparov. No, it wasn't Kasparov. Knight takes a6. So obviously, you know, we want to keep the knight on d4 and I mean, you know, resigning here is very very good option. You know, I remember, you know, when I played, you know, Korpov in Seville, you know, 1904, you know, the match was match went pretty well for me, but Korpov, you know, he always, you know, resigned late. All right, takes d5. We can take g4. We can take d5. It absolutely doesn't matter as long as you're taking something. Let's take g4. That just seems more incisive. It hits the rook. And if he goes rook g3, we have a nice tactic to finish off the game. Okay, yeah, you guys are already seeing it. What's important is that the knight is taking away the square from the king. We have the second ingredient, the doubled rooks. And queen takes g3 ends the game. Rook f1 is checkmate. And, you know, if you're a beginner somewhere out in the chat and saying, well, how did you see that quickly? That's, oh, $10 from Le Petit Penguin. Okay, he castles. Let's just take on f2. We could have taken to the rook, but this simplifies the position. How did I see that so quickly? Well, that's where puzzles come in. That's where you pull yourself up by the bootstraps. So with just endless puzzle solving at the beginning of your chess development. That's the great technique. And then you'll just find that you find these moves even without knowing how you found them. You're just gonna notice it, and that's how pattern recognition works. Relatively easy game. Not a lot to talk about. There's just one thing I wanted to explain, which is the question of why. Okay, so first of all, yeah, bishop b7, d6. This is all normal. Okay, so just to reiterate, a lot of times you'll see people going bishop b3, and then the move d5 is very powerful, particularly because he's placed his two minors awkwardly, and d4 is now a fork threat. And in the event of a trade on d5, black just has a great position. Okay, so bishop takes, f takes, queen d2. Why not a5? Because after a4, I feel like, remember, we have to allow the potential of attacking on the queen side. I feel like now if white castles queen side, black is going to have a much harder time opening up the queen side. So I just don't see the point of locking everything up so quickly. I feel like a6 is more flexible. d5 I mentioned as a possible move. And here white should probably respond with bishop g5. I was a little bit concerned that my e5 pawn was going to become a little bit weak. So I didn't, you know, I didn't want to commit to anything. d5 isn't really going anywhere. And I think a6 is an annoying move to face. Now, g4 was almost the decisive mistake. But had he castled short, there's a couple of techniques for attacking the king side here. And the two main ones are queen e8, queen g6, and the knight coming to h5. And usually these ideas are in conjunction with each other. Because once you get the queen to g6, you're going to threaten rook takes f3, and the knight can come out to f4. And I love these positions for black. This is the kind of position I beat Wesley in aim chess. I feel like black just gets really nice attacking chances here. So that's partially why opening up the f-file like this is good for black. One thing you got to be a little bit careful about is a move like knight g5. In some positions, this could be nasty. Here, it doesn't give anything due to queen d7. And in some positions, you'll have this as a follow-up move. Obviously, here, it's a Bote's gambit. Okay, so I think the rest after g4 was pretty self-explanatory. d5, rook f4, slicing off the queen. That technique of slicing the connection between two pieces with another piece is important. Not rushing to take pawns, especially when they give your opponent some life, and instead focusing on bringing all of the pieces to ideal squares. This kind of patience to realize the pawns are not going anywhere. White's position is way too broken to defend any of the pawns. So we start by getting everything to proper squares, then the win kind of presents itself. All right? So that's where we're going to end for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the speedrun game. We'll see you guys later. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed hanging out. Good night, everybody.